The Gators Breakdown podcast is ready to go. I'm your host, David Waters, and you can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SEC. And joining me for this episode of Gators Breakdown is Kevin McGuffey, who covers the Kentucky Wildcats for Last Word on College Football. Kevin, we had you on last year, and I'm glad we could turn it around and get you on again this year.
Well, thank you very much, David, for having me on. I really, really appreciate it, and look forward to talking with you about the game on Saturday.
Yeah, and look, it was the first game Saturday. Was it finally a relief? College football season has started.
Yes, it was. Doing the stuff for Last Word on College Football, it's like, okay, you get into the summer, it's like, okay, what can you write about? It's like, okay, you can talk about recruiting, okay, and then more recruiting, and then you talk about, you start previewing the teams, and then then you finally get there, and it's like, yeah, it was just like, it should be. I always think, we joke it should be a national holiday, like that Thursday, now that the season started on Thursday, that should be a national holiday or something. It's like, yes, football's back. But yeah, no, it was good. It was good to finally get going here in 2018.
That's kind of how I see the Monday of Labor Day. It's a celebration of college football weekend for me. So that's the day off for me. That's what it means.
No, yeah. Yeah, that's what I did. I actually was off from my job, my real job. I work at a television station here in Lexington, and I had actually was able to get Monday off. So I watched lots of football, golf, some tennis. You're just kind of vegged out on the, and just watch sports all day. So watch a lot of SEC football.
Absolutely. So we'll get into a preview of the Kentucky Wildcats here with Kevin in just a second. But remember, you can find all your Gators Breakdown episodes on news4jax.com/Gators Breakdown, as well as the articles from the News for Jax sports team. That's news4jax.com/Gators Breakdown. Also, you can listen on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube if you want the video version or catching us live like you are right now. And when using those services, please share, rate, and review the show. Let Gator Nation know what they're getting with Gators Breakdown. Hey, and on social media, Twitter and Facebook, follow us at Gators Breakdown. So, Kevin, let's go back to last year before we hear, you hit this year. It was a Kentucky coulda, shoulda, woulda won that game versus Florida last year. There's been some tightly contested battles over the last few years, but that one had to be probably one of the worst ones, right?
Oh, definitely. I think, to coin a phrase, it was the most Kentucky football game ever. The come from ahead 28-27 loss. We were talking before. I said, we sat here this time last year, and I was like, this is it. This is the year. Kentucky's breaking the streak, and and it's 27-13 going into the fourth quarter. Cat fans are feeling great, or as good as we can feel, because as the long-suffering Kentucky fan, you always have that feeling in the pit of your stomach. Okay, what's going to happen? You just can't help it. Something's going to happen. And it did. It just happened for a second time that, the defense left somebody uncovered, left Swain uncovered. And, they got that touchdown. And then Steven Johnson drove them down the field. And we got the holding penalty on Nick Haynes, which, I won't get into that. We'll say it was questionable and just leave it at that. And then, moved Austin McGinnis back, and he still almost, made that 57-yard field goal. But yeah, it was just, a gut, a punch to the gut. It was just so, so depressing. And it was just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. This was going to be the year. This was our year. We're breaking the streak. And then to have it end like that, it was, it was awful. But like I said, unfortunately for the long suffering Kentucky fan, you don't want to say you get used to these things or you expect them, but like as I said, you get that feeling like, okay, what's going to happen? We can't handle prosperity.
All right, so then Dan Mullen comes to Florida now, and of course Kentucky is familiar with Dan Mullen. They were the crossover division opponents from his Mississippi State days. So Mississippi State and Kentucky played every year. So Kentucky knows Dan Mullen pretty well. So what do you remember most about Dan Mullen's teams in Starkville?
The biggest thing I remember is that Kentucky couldn't beat them. In the 9 years that he was in Starkville, Kentucky was 1-8. The only win coming 2 years ago on a last-second field goal, by Austin McGinnis. That some people, as we've gone through like the last year or so, there's been whispers, that game actually may have saved Coach Stoops' job by beating Mississippi State. But the biggest thing, like I said, is just, they were always just a big physical team. they always have, whether it was Fitzgerald or, Dak Prescott before that, they always had, that quarterback that seemingly Kentucky could never stop, whether it's running, passing, either way. And then they always were always good on the defense, especially the defensive line, like Mississippi State's, team line this year is great. But like I said, that's the biggest thing we remember is that, basically the fact that Kentucky hasn't been able, was not able to beat Mullen while we're there. And, there's one of the columnists here in town for the Lexington Herald-Leader talked about how they think, the window closing for Kentucky to break the streak because of Mullen's dominance against the Cats when he was at Mississippi State. Because you figure with Florida's resources, recruiting in the state of Florida, last year, the 4-7 was obviously not the norm. That was a rare exception. And, I think people here, and I'm sure you guys, you could answer this better than me, are expecting, you guys to be right back up at the top now, 9-10 win, seasons, possible BC, bowl championship, games, things like that. But that's the biggest thing is like the fact that Kentucky just for whatever reason couldn't get over the hump. Some of those games were very close, but then there were a lot like last year that were just total upsets. I mean, not total upsets, just total blowouts.
Yeah, last time Kentucky visited the Swamp, it was it's still probably Luke Del Rio's best game ever as a Gator. So he came in and saved Florida last year in Lexington, as we said there. So no Luke Del Rio for Kentucky fans to deal with this year.
No, but I will say what I saw of Frank's, on Saturday, I probably watched maybe a couple quarters of that game. I was very impressed with what I saw from him. I don't know if it's, implementing Mullen's system, but he seemed much more comfortable in the pocket, seemed much more, just a much more complete player than what we had remembered last year. And as you said, he got pulled during that game and, Del Rio came in and as you said, led them to a victory. So.
All right, so let's go back to last week in Kentucky. Had a really turnover-prone first half versus Central Michigan, but ended up putting it all together. Kentucky shut out Central Michigan in the second half and leaned on the ground game a lot in that second half as well. Kentucky did not commit a turnover in the second half after giving the ball away 4 times in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Kentucky starting a true, basically not a true freshman, but basically, Terry Wilson and Gunnar Hoke, neither one of them has ever played in the college football game, an actual game. Terry Wilson played, in junior college last year in Kansas, but, Hoke has never played, he's been in the system 3 years. I attribute a lot of that with Wilson to nerves. I think he was nervous. I think he was trying to do too much. He had two fumbles and an interception. And if you go back and look at his stats, even in junior college, that was the big bugaboo with him is that he was turnover prone. Late in the second quarter, he took a shot and injured his shoulder, and the Cats, they brought in Gunnar Hoke, and he led the team right down as like a 71-yard drive before the end of the half, and which gave Kentucky the lead 21-20. But then neither one of them, did a whole lot in the second half. But once they got the lead, they just relied on the ground game, with Benny Snell and then also AJ Rose and. Like I said, the turnovers, I think, was more nerves than anything and just trying to do too much.
All right, so, Kevin, if Wilson was named starter, right, for the game coming up against Florida.
Yes, yes.
All right, so do you still think how short is the leash? Do you think we see more than one quarterback or, is it are they going to ride with Wilson or I guess, going back to last week, did he just get pulled because he got dinged up or – was there probably going to be a change at quarterback anyway?
See, I think they want to stay with Wilson. I mean, they've been, it was the quarterback race is really tight between he and Hoke, but they just love the options that he gives them, that run pass, the kind of quarterback Kentucky hasn't, Steven Johnson was able to do it some, he could run the ball and pass, but he just offers so many things, possibilities that Hoke may not. Hoke's probably just a better drop back passer. To answer your question, I think, Wilson will start unless he has like 3 turnovers or, something happens and it just goes south quickly. I think they want to leave Wilson in there and see what he can do, for an entire game. But like I said, if something happens, he fumbles, they have 3 turnovers. He fumbles a lot, interceptions. You may see Hoke in there.
All right, so you mentioned Benny Snell, and of course the offense goes through him, and the junior ran for 125 yards and 20 attempts last week. But sophomore A.J. Rose, as you mentioned him as well, scored the first 2 touchdowns of his career and added another 104 yards. And Kentucky for the day, 299 yards on the ground, and that added your 427 yards of total offense. We know Snell is the guy, but have they maybe found somebody that could add some depth behind him and Rose?
Yeah, I think they really have. AJ Rose is one of the stars of the spring this year. He had 3 touchdowns. Benny Snell didn't play in the spring game this year. He had I think it was an ankle sprain or something. Rose had 130 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he's a guy that I think that the coaching staff thinks can come in, as you saw last Saturday. Snell had 100, as you said, 125 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he was in the hospital the night before. He had flu. I don't know if it's flu-like symptoms, but he was very sick, and there was questions whether or not he was even going to play on Saturday. But he came out. Like I said, had 100 yards, 2 touchdowns, and like I said with Rose, Rose gives them another guy they can go to give Snell a break. Now I'm sure if it was up to Benny, of course Benny likes to refer to himself in the third person now, which is which is one of the most the funniest things ever. I think he says Benny Snell is going to do this, and Benny he offers, like I said, Rose offers him another option. I think to win on Saturday, I think Snell's got to have a career game. We'll probably talk about more of that later, but I think he's got to have a career game. But also I think they have Rose, and they also have Siam King, who also can play. He played some snaps, especially in that fourth quarter on Saturday when they were trying to run the clock out. Basically, once they got the lead and they just, kind of ran the ball, kind of maybe even see a rotation of those 3 guys.
All right, Kevin, if we move to the other side of the ball, Kevin McGuffey of Last Word on College Football joining me here, previewing the Kentucky Wildcats as the Gators' opponent this Saturday in the Swamp at 7:30 on SEC Network. Here we go on the other side of the ball. Kentucky had to lean on its defense a lot in the first half. We mentioned all those turnovers, those 4 turnovers that the offense had. Central Michigan converted each turnover into points, though only 13 of those points were scored on the Kentucky defense. Chippewas had a fumble return for a touchdown in the first half and kicked 2 field goals, but also scored a touchdown on a drive that was prolonged by a penalty. So, Kevin, we go into this season, only 1 game played so far. You have a lot of starters back. That's where a lot of people have pointed to Kentucky, and maybe the reason Kentucky would turn the corner this year because you guys had so many starters back on the defense. Where areas do you expect to see improvement with all these starters back?
I think the biggest thing, it starts with the linebackers, with Josh Allen and Jordan Jones. One thing you guys will notice if you saw any of the game from Saturday, they moved Josh Allen from the weak side to the strong side linebacker, like the hybrid defensive end position, in hopes of him getting to the quarterback more. And, he had a bunch of sacks the first half of the season and none the second half. And, it worked out on Saturday because he had a sack. He was second on the team in tackles with 10 and had a sack and 3 tackles for a loss. It starts with those guys. They lost Denzel Ware, who decided to leave the program. Another guy who they thought was going to be a big contributor this year was Josh Paschal, who played a lot as a freshman. He diagnosed he has basically like a cancer, like a melanoma in his foot that he had to have surgery on. So he was a guy that they lost. But the linebacker, it starts with the linebackers. The biggest thing that the coaching staff has been talking about throughout camp, and even saw it a little bit on Saturday, is on the defensive line. The line has been, for the last 2 or 3 years, has been probably the weakest spot on the on that side of the ball. But you have guys like Quentin Bahana and Tamir Dubose, people like that who played really good. Phil Hoskins, guys who stepped up, helped stop the run, got some pressure on the quarterback. So those are 2. That's been the biggest question mark, has been the defensive line. And then you move to the secondary. The secondary was supposed to be, last season was supposed to be Kentucky's best, supposed to be one of the best secondaries in the country, and they struggled badly for whatever reason. Nobody really seems to know what the deal was. But, they were, near the bottom in the nation in pass defense last year, And you have, Mike Edwards, who's a potential, high draft pick. You've got Derek Beatty. You've got, Chris Westry, who unfortunately he got ejected from the game on Saturday for a targeting call. But, you have guys, that have a lot of experience, but for whatever reason, they just didn't, couldn't put it together last year. It's you're only basing it on one game right now, but you said they held them to, like, I think it was 118 yards passing or something, something like that. And the quarterback from Central Michigan, Poljan, he was, one of those dual threat kind of guys, which is, people, but the kind of quarterbacks who've given Kentucky fits over the years. And they did a really, really good job, on containing him. And then they had a really good running back, Jonathan Ward, who actually went out of the game, didn't play a lot. He got injured. But like to go back to your point, the defensive line is one place where they're really looking for improvement, and the coaches have seen a lot of improvement. Now, going from Central Michigan to playing Florida, we'll see what it looks like. We'll see what it looks like on Saturday. But that's that. Of course, you can say that about every game, but the offensive defensive line battle, especially on the Kentucky defensive side, I think will have a big play a big role in how the game goes on Saturday.
No, I definitely agree with you there. Going back to Florida's first game and years past, just all Florida offensive line has not been a strength of the team. And even though it was Charleston Southern, they did struggle opening some running lanes, getting to the second level there. And, Florida just couldn't find the running lanes you expect in the Dan Mullen offense. It was the first game. They're still figuring everything out. They'll go back and watch film this week and look at what they did wrong. But I agree with you there. It is the Kentucky defensive line versus this Florida offensive line that probably will be the key to the game for the Florida defense, and turn it right around for Kentucky as well, is probably that Kentucky offensive line opening hole for Benny Snell and against this Florida defensive line. But going back to the Kentucky defense, and you talked about, it was the second worst pass defense in the SEC. Last year, gave up 200 yards and more. Do you expect this defensive line to help that secondary? Do you think that could have been an issue for why the secondary maybe fell off last year? Because was the pressure there from the defensive line last year?
Yeah. I think it's a very good point. I think Kentucky was having trouble getting to the, going back to the thing about Josh Allen. He was great in the first half of the season, at getting to the quarterback. You go back and watch some of those games, and quarterbacks, had literally all day to pass, with SEC caliber receivers, if you're trying to guard somebody, 6-7 seconds, it's hard to do. Eventually, somebody's going to break free. And I think that was a big part of it. As I said, some of those guys had really good games on Saturday, and then you move in, like I said, with Allen, they moved, Jordan Jones is healthy. He was hurt, off and on a lot of last year. And, I think the biggest thing, like I said, getting to the ball, I think that's going to be that's something that they've improved on. And like I said, I'm going to be very interested to see how they do, against SEC caliber competition, especially somebody who they've, have obviously had trouble with, in the past.
All right, Kevin, I went back. I was at SEC Media Days, and of course, Stoops was asked about the streak of losing to Florida, and I think he's pretty much accepted the fact that being asked about it at SEC Media Days, he can't get away from it. How do you think he's? I ain't saying he's accepting the losing streak, but accepting having to be, it be the elephant in the room now every time this game comes up.
Yeah, no, I don't know if it was the first question somebody asked, but I think it was one of the, one of the first 4 or 5. It's part of Kentucky football. Unfortunately, for years it was the streak against Florida, then it was the streak against, Tennessee. 7 years ago, Kentucky finally broke that one. I think what Coach Stoops usually says is, I've only been here for 6 of those games, which is, I guess you can kind of look at it that way. There's been, I think, 6. I believe Coach Stoops is the 6th Kentucky coach who's been here since, the last time Kentucky beat Florida, in '86. Like I said, it's just part of it. The best thing you can do is to just go out there and win. But like I said, he handles it. He knows it's going to come. As you said, it's going to come up every week. And, there's no set answer. There's no cute answer. It just, it happens. It's this game we have to play at some point, At some point we're going to win. At least, Kentucky fans think we're going to win at some point. But like I said, usually Coach Stoops' answer is that, well, I've only been here for, this is only my sixth season. So I've only, I haven't been here for all 31 games. These players have only been here for a couple of games. There's probably players, the media will remind them, I'm sure, all this week. But I'm sure, there's players, that don't even know about the streak. They just know, okay, we played Florida, we lost to Florida last year, we lost to Florida the last couple of years. They're only trying to focus. They're trying to keep the team focused on this game and not the streak. And whether that how good a job they do on that, you just don't know.
All right, Kevin. If it's not Benny Snell on offense, who's the player we should be looking out for? That may be the name by the time the game ends.
Well, like I said, if they're going to concentrate on the running game, it would probably be AJ Rose. Throwing the ball, Kentucky didn't have a whole lot of success throwing the ball, but a guy to watch out for is David Bouvier. Mm-hmm. He's a local kid from here at Lexington Catholic, who's just worked his way up the roster and into a starting position this season, and he was the leading receiver on Saturday. I think he has 5. Got my days confused. I think he had 5 catches for like around 50 yards. He's kind of he's kind of a little shifty. He's like 5'9". He's one of those guys. I compare him to like I'm trying to think of not like an Amendola or somebody like that. One of those little guys that always just seems to get open, and that's what he does. That's a name that definitely watch out for. Wilson and Hoke both seem to have a good rapport with him. Obviously, we talk about CJ Conrad every year at tight end. Mm-hmm. He'll go through games where he'll have like 3 touchdowns in the game, and then he'll go three games without a catch. And it drove Kentucky fans crazy for whatever reason. Like Steven Johnson and Conrad can never seem to get on the same page. There'll be, like I said, there'll be one game where he'll do something. I have a lot of stats, and then he'll go like 3 games without a catch. He's somebody to watch out for. Another guy to watch out for is Lynn Bowden. He's another wide receiver. He was Kentucky's highest rated, recruit from last year. He caught, I think it's like 15 catches this past season. He's also the kickoff return guy, and Bouvier will actually be the punt return guy. Bowden has the breakaway speed. They're just waiting for him to put it all together. He got on campus late last year because he was still getting his academics sorted out. So he's only just now gone through an entire season of conditioning and being, being around the whole team for the winter. But those are 3 guys, Bouvier and Conrad, and Bowden would be names that I would keep an eye on as Florida fans as you're watching the game on Saturday.
Kevin, last thing here, and I'll hit it later on, and when I wrap everything up here. I think the key stat for me in this game is 150 rushing yards for Kentucky. And I want to get your opinion on that. If Florida can hold Kentucky less than 150 yards rushing, I have a hard time seeing Kentucky win this game. I think one of the main stats there, if Kentucky can get 150 more yards rushing, then I think then that could be the key stat of maybe Benny Snell and Rose get going and upset the Gators.
I agree 100%. If Kentucky runs for less than 150 yards, then I think Florida wins the game easily. As I said earlier, I think Snell needs to have a career game, whether it's, in touchdowns or yards. I think Kentucky needs, they ran for almost 300 yards on this past weekend. I think they need a similar effort, like that on Saturday to have a chance to win. They've got to try to control, ball control. They're going to run the ball a lot. I think if anything less than, I would say even less than 200 yards, Kentucky probably does not win that game on Saturday. But if the Gators defense is able to stop the run, then the Kentucky passing game is the great unknown because, as I said, neither one of the quarterbacks, like I said, Wilson or Hoke, have only played in one game. And in Hoke's case, he only played like 3 series. He played that 1 series at the end of the first half and the 2 series in the second half. So, you don't have a whole lot of games to base everything on. So, I think if Kentucky controls the ball, if they run, like I said, at least 200 yards, then I think they have a chance of winning. But we know how Kentucky we know how Kentucky football luck goes, especially against the Gators.
Okay, one thing just sprung to me as well. Going, yeah, does Kentucky on defense? Do the guys blitz a lot? Because I really do think that may be what the Kentucky defense comes and tries to do to kind of mess with Felipe Franks to see how he handles pressure. Because Charleston Southern wasn't able to do it a whole lot, and he actually got some pretty good pass blocking for the night on Saturday night. But is Kentucky some kind of scheme them up with any exotic blitz packages that can come in or confuse Franks, or is it more just your front 3-4 guys going and beating that offensive line?
I think a lot of it is just trying to beat the offensive line. It wouldn't surprise me to see them, maybe blitz with Jones, or even, with Jones or Allen, or maybe run Mike Edwards in like on a safety blitz, kind of thing. Just to try something and see what happens. Now I'll say that, and they'll blitz every play on Saturday. but no, I like I said, just basing it on one game against Central Michigan, they didn't do a whole lot of that.
Yeah.
But they may just, it's like I said, it's the first game, and it's you can never tell. You can't tell that much from the first game. I said, if it was me, I would try it. I would throw some kind of blitz schemes up there, and just see what happens. And if you get and you're trying to count on your secondary, your secondary is supposed to be highly rated. That they're going to stop the Florida defenders.
All right, Kevin. Thanks for joining me here and previewing this Kentucky Wildcats. What you guys got coming up here on Last Word on College Football this week?
Oh, well, first, thank you for having me on again. I really appreciate it. Like I said, we've got, I called it a therapy session, for lack of a better term. We did, I basically did a countdown. I put a poll up on my Twitter page, actually, which you can follow at Kevin McGuffey if you like. Plug. And I said, okay, we picked the top 5. I called it the ranking Kentucky's most heartbreaking losses to Florida. And I picked 4 games, and then and you can probably guess the games. It was, last season, 2014, 93, and 2003.
Yeah.
And then I threw in, another category, and then, I think the 2007 game, which was, I was at that game. It was one of the most exciting, games I've ever been to. That was, the college game day with, Tim Tebow, Andre Woodson had the career game. It was, we lost, Kentucky lost, but it was still, one of the most fun games I've ever been to.
You can say we.
Okay. That was, that's going to be posted tomorrow. And I, encourage all the Gator fans to check it out. And you can just, from your all standpoint, to be reliving the good days.
Yeah.
But
I'll be sure to share. I'm sure some Gator fans will definitely, with the game coming up, of course.
Right. And then we have, I don't think his name is Hector Rodriguez, I believe, who covers Florida for Last Word on College Football, and does a great job with that. So I have to give him a shout out. But I went through that, and I was like I said, it's like a therapy session. I was like, I'm just going to get this all out, and then at the end, I do have a preview of the game, and make a prediction. And like I said, I'm not coming on here this year guaranteeing a Kentucky victory like I did last year. We'll put it like that. So now, where did the streak? I think the streak will end when you least expect it. Like when they finally beat Tennessee, Kentucky had a wide receiver. Their top 2 quarterbacks were out. They had a wide receiver, play quarterback that day, Matt Roark, and they beat Tennessee 10-7 to finally break that streak. So, I think a lot of people, have been kind of low. I don't want to say low key this week, but it's almost like, okay, let's don't talk about it. The media, of course, because you can't, as you talked about earlier, you can't help but not talk about it. But it's like, okay, if we're going to try reverse psychology. We're not going to talk about the streak. We're not going to talk about last year. We're not going to, talk about any of that stuff and see if that helps. But like I said, I think the point spread's like 15, which seemed a little high to me. I think it's going to be less than that. And spoiler alert, I will say it. I picked Florida to win. So reverse. We'll say reverse psychology on that too. I think I picked it like 27-20 or something like that. So, but anyway, that'll be up on Last Word on College Football tomorrow. Or if you like, I mean, there's we have writers. I think of just about everybody in the SEC. I think maybe except for Arkansas. I think Arkansas, maybe Mississippi State. A couple of teams like that, but give them a shout out or follow on Twitter. I think it's at Last Word on CFB is the Twitter. I'm going to get that wrong, and I'll get fussed at tomorrow. But anyway,
everybody, all the Gator fans that are listening to this, they'll follow me. You tag me in it, I'll retweet it. We'll get them there.
Well, I appreciate that. Like I said, it was kind of a therapy session for me just to get it out, and I think it turned out pretty well. So, like I said, we went through and ranked those 5 games and went through some of the highlights, and then, like I said, then did a brief preview of the game, on Saturday. So.
Yeah, they say good work there at Last Word on College Football. Hey, that's where I got my start. That's where I started with that. I started there, and now I'm just sticking to the podcast. But a lot of good work there. And Mike Laval, he'll be joining us the week of the Tennessee game.
Yeah, next week. Yeah, or is it 2 weeks?
2 weeks. Yeah.
2 weeks. That's right.
Colorado State's in between this year.
Right. Yeah, because Kentucky has Murray State next week, so we have our game against the FCS team next week. So, which should be a cakewalk, but you just never know, because Murray like 20 years ago was one of the best teams, in then Division I AA football, but they've not been very good the last few years. So, but anyway.
All right, Kevin, thank you once again for joining and previewing this Kentucky Wildcats, and we look for a good game on Saturday.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Good luck, and it's great talking to you. As always, look forward to doing it again in the future.
All right, yeah, we'll plan to do it again next year.
All right, cool. Thank you.
All right, Kevin. Thanks, man. All right. Kevin McGuffey from Last Word on College Football. Good site there. Like I said, I got my start there, started writing there, and then kind of just wanted to do the podcast, so that's how it all worked out. So from here on out for the rest of the show, if I seem kind of distracted, I have a fantasy draft going on right now, so that'll be. I'm trying to keep an eye on it. So if you're watching the YouTube version, you'll see my head be swiveling, going to the iPad, and trying to figure out the draft and all that stuff. So here we go. Florida, Kentucky. Hey, the Gators sent out in the media guide some notable numbers, of course, of the streak of what's going on between Florida and Kentucky. Florida's 31-game winning streak against Kentucky is the 4th longest streak in an uninterrupted series in NCAA history. And come Saturday, here's a big number. Come Saturday, it will be 11,620 days since Florida last lost to Kentucky in football. And here's another one. Florida has also won 13 consecutive SEC openers. So there we go. So here's notable numbers from the streak, and these are some pretty good numbers here. I'll kind of just fly through these, but some pretty good numbers when tying everything in together. Since Florida and Kentucky have been playing a plus 733 Florida total point differential, 733 more better points for Florida in this winning streak. 98 different Gators responsible for touchdowns. 66 is the largest winning margin for Florida. That was in 1994. 23.6 is the Florida's average margin of victory. 15 times Florida has won at least by 21 points. 8 games decided by single digits. 7 times Florida has won by at least 35 points. 7 different coaches have beat Kentucky in the streak. 6 times Florida has scored at least 50 points. 2 shutouts, 1996 and 2012. One overtime game. We all remember that one. Demarcus Robinson, Jeff Driscoll to Demarcus Robinson in 2014. And one is the Florida's narrowest margin of victory. That was in 2017, a 1-point win last year. And 284 as Florida total wins since November 15th, 1986. So some big numbers there, of course. And it's the my picks up. Here we go. And we'll see, if Florida can keep it going here, and here's the things I want to see when Florida and Kentucky meet up. I kind of let Kevin, I talked to him about I think the 150 yards rushing is an important streak, but also got some other ones here in what I want to see. And of course, guys, going back and looking at it, is Felipe Franks looking comfortable within the offense again. A tempo similar to what we saw last week as well. Come out fast. It makes a difference. I really do think it makes a difference. I think Franks is more comfortable in it. Cuts down on all the thinking. And the coaches are there on the sidelines, calling in plays and checks. And this style of offense just really helps Felipe Franks. Look, he had a great second quarter last week, and just like to see him pick up where he left off, get off to a fast start. Start fast and make this Kentucky team play catch up from the get go. That is the best path to a win. In the preview just a few minutes ago, you heard how much Kentucky is going to rely on Benny Snell and rely on this run game. You get up quick on them and make Wilson or Hoke come in and have to throw, and they're not throwing on this Florida secondary with any kind of consistency if they get down big. So if Florida gets up big, I wouldn't expect any type of comeback from Kentucky there. Once again, brought it up earlier as well. The offensive line needs to come in and assert themselves, and this will be a test with that linebacker Josh Allen and that defensive line for Kentucky that has plenty of experience in that front seven. This is the front seven that can easily give this offensive line some trouble. Keeping Franks clean is a must for him to continue his good play from last week. And I do think Kentucky will bring a lot of pressure if they need it. Now, I think, much like Kevin said, I also think they'll see what they can get away with from the pressure from the defensive line, but not bringing blitzes to begin with. But if it gets to that point, they'll start bringing guys left and right and see if they can confuse Franks, especially if Franks gets off to a fast start and they need to start making something happen. But if the offensive line can hold up for the Gators, and Kentucky would need to bring numbers. And look, it'll be up to Franks then to start hitting some one-on-one matchups, and that's where the big plays that happen. Right there. So I mentioned the key stat, I think, overall key stat for Florida to win this game. Hold this Kentucky ground game to about 150 yards. Hold them around there. This one might be tough to do, and not saying Florida won't win if Kentucky gets more than 150 yards. But if Florida holds around that line, I don't see Kentucky winning. Setting the edge is a must here, and hopefully the Gators can show that they can get that part down as an aggressive defense. Polite, Moon, Zuniga, and others must be sound in this, while being aggressive at the same time, because this is the only way Kentucky will win this game is if they rack up the rushing yards there. They're not going to be able to pass on Florida. If they can continually hit big plays in the run game, then Kentucky can find a way to win this game. But Florida also has to tackle well. Benny Snell had 80 yards after contact last week and forced 8 missed tackles. And Florida had some trouble last week in tackling, and players have talked about it. Marco Wilson in particular, he pointed out that they have to get better in tackling. So, look, Kentucky's going to come in running the ball, and the coaches know the game plan, and that's what it's going to be. So, stop the run game, force them to pass. You got to like your chances if you're the Gators there. So that'll kind of do it for the Kentucky preview here. Look, go pack the swamp, guys. I think there's a few tickets out there left. Go support Dan Mullen in this SEC opener. Last week was fun. Let's make this week even funner with the SEC schedule kicking off, and it should be a lot of good time there. Bill Sykes will be with me. We'll be tailgating around the Harmonic Woods area, so we'll be tailgating with those guys, and I'll introduce him to that. So that'll be a whole lot of fun. But go get a ticket. Let's go be in the swamp together and have a lot of fun. Hold on, I gotta make another pick here. So. Sorry, this isn't good podcasting, but I gotta do what I gotta do here and make some good picks here. So, but yeah, it should be fun, and we'll see how the Gators are ranked coming into this game as well. Both polls came out, so in the coaches and the AP poll, the Gators are ranked 25th. In both polls. So nice to see the Gators get noticed there. Like I think it was the coaches poll that they were one of the polls. I forget, they were ranked around 27th anyway. So with teams losing in front of them, they were definitely going to move up and get ranked when it was all said and done after week 1 and the results from there. So hey, look, Gators got a commitment too. Since the last time we were on, I think we did our last show Monday night, and the Gators got a commitment then right after. We recorded our last episode. So 6'5", 315-pound, 4-star offensive tackle William Harrod committed to Florida fresh off a visit last week. Had offers from Michigan, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Boston College, and others as well. He's the nation's 304th overall prospect and the number 30 and a number 31st offensive tackle in the 2019 recruiting class. A good job by the staff to get him to commit right after the visit, and it looks like he was sold soon after he stepped foot on campus. And I think the atmosphere Saturday night was just icing on the cake for Herod to get him in here. He's the 14th overall commit and Florida's 4th offensive line commit, as the Gators look to sign a total of 5 offensive linemen in this class. Definitely a position of need to get guys to come in here and know the Hevesy standard from the get-go is nice. Get those guys who can come in and have to know the expectations from Hevesy right away. So also, good for Dan Mullen to kind of come in here and identify a problem. The offensive line isn't where it needs to be. Numbers aren't where it needs to be. Numbers that can go out there and prove it on the field aren't where they need to be. This is a position group of guys that haven't got it done. It's time to turn it around and look. They're going out there and getting numbers, and they're getting guys that they've identified that they want. So it's a problem. So good for going out there and identifying, getting some four-star guys out here along the offensive line, and who can come in and make a difference. So identify a problem, and look, he did it with quarterback already. With the commits he's got: Emory Jones, Jalen Jones, Anthony Richardson, and now doing the same thing at offensive line. And hopefully, yes, it lends itself to a fast turnaround on that position group there. So the Gators are ranked 22nd in the nation in the 24/7 Sports Composite rankings and 11th overall in the SEC. They are ranked 15th if you go by average recruiting ranking. That's what I like to use. More. It doesn't necessarily count all the. Some teams are ranked higher right now just because they have higher numbers. So if you go just by average recruiting ranking, Florida is ranked 15th. Right now, and keep your eyes peeled on Thursday. Cornerback Jaden Hill will be making. It looks like he'll be making his announcement on Thursday. A good chance Florida could get him in the fold as well. 4-star cornerback there. So keep your eyes out on Thursday. It looks to be a Florida-Tennessee battle, and we'll see where it ends up for the Gators on Thursday, more than likely. So before we sign off here, look, a bunch of good SEC games coming up this week, and. Starting at noon, we'll go through the slate for the SEC right here. Mississippi State at Kansas State. Of course, Dan Mullen's former team going all the way to Manhattan, Kansas to play at noon. So Mississippi State at Kansas, that's a good game to keep an eye on. Nevada at Vanderbilt's also at noon. Arkansas State at Alabama, 3:30. The game of the week in the SEC where two teams are playing each other, of course. Georgia and South Carolina at South Carolina. So look, the SEC East is going to be, I won't say a lot clearer, but you'll have some more results to start comparing each other with Florida and Kentucky and Georgia at South Carolina. So two teams will be, toward the top of the SEC East standings. So the winner of those two games there will be looking down on everybody else. We'll see if Will Muschamp can get a big win if Georgia looks to continue their dominance in the SEC East. Southern Illinois at Ole Miss at 4 o'clock. East Tennessee State versus Tennessee at 4 o'clock. Southeastern Louisiana versus LSU at 7. Wyoming and Missouri is also at 7. That could be a sneaky good game, maybe. And to round it out, Alabama State at Auburn at 7:30, and Arkansas at Colorado State is also at 7:30. And of course, Florida and Kentucky are at 7:30 on a SEC network. So it should be it'll be the same crew that called the game last week. So you'll be used to those guys from last week and everything they bring to the table. I really like Cole Kublik as an on-field analyst there, and Jordan Rogers and Tom Hart, I think, is the crew. So pretty good crew for the SEC network there. So good week in the SEC as far as SEC East goes. Texas A&M Clemson also play, so that's probably the national game of the week. But in the conference, I still think we got to go to Georgia, South Carolina, especially for what it means for the Gators in the SEC East. So once again, I want to thank Kevin McGuffey for joining me from Last Word on College Football. Check his work out there. He'll be sharing his story of some heartbreaks from Kentucky's games with Florida, and also his Florida-Kentucky preview where he didn't give a score to us. It'll be in his article for sure of what he's picking Florida to beat Kentucky. So we'll see where that goes there. But check that out on Thursday. I'll be sharing that from Kevin. Thanks, guys, for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown. You can find us on newsforjacks.com / Gators Breakdown. Look, iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, whichever way you want to get it. Thanks for listening. I'm glad you guys really helped us out this past weekend. A lot of listens for the first 2 episodes after the win over Charleston Southern. So thank you much. Also, squadlocker.com, search Gators Breakdown. You can get Gators Breakdown merchandise there, shirts, hats, polos, all that good stuff. Really good looking stuff finally for as far as merchandise goes. So if you guys want to rep some Gators Breakdown out there, it is very much appreciated. So I'm your host, David Waters. You can find me on Twitter at GatorDave_SCC. And guys and girls out there, thanks for listening to this episode of Gators Breakdown.